You can work on getting everybody in.
Share slides backwards.
I will start recording. Please make sure you're on mute. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you've joined us tonight to discuss the findings from our newly released report, The New Coal, Plastics and Climate Change. My name's Jennifer Congdon, and I'm the Deputy Director of Beyond Plastics, a project out of Bennington College with the goal to end plastic pollution everywhere. Tonight, we'll hear from Judith Enck, President of Beyond Plastics and former EPA Regional Administrator, who will give a broad overview of the report and its findings and put the information into context. Next, we'll hear from Jim Vallette, President of Material Research and the report's lead author. And then last but not least, we'll hear from Alexis Golsdmith, the National Organizing Director for Beyond Plastics, to discuss some actions you can take. So first, let me introduce Judith Enck. She's the president and founder of Beyond Plastics. She was the Deputy Secretary for the Environment in New York State, and most recently, before launching Beyond Plastics in 2019, she was the Regional Administrator for the U.S. EPA in Region 2, appointed by President Obama. She launched Beyond Plastics in January 2019 and at Bennington College, where she's a visiting professor and teaches courses about plastic pollution. Judith? Oh, you're on mute, Judith. You were so good.
You missed a really great opening. Now I'll just be boring. Wonderful to see all of you. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for coming. I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do after the Obama administration, because when you're appointed by the president, you know when your last day on the job is. When he leaves, or maybe in the future when she leaves, that's when political appointees depart. So I decided to work full-time on plastic pollution because of the urgency of the issue. I had a couple other options. It's not like the offers were flowing in from the fossil fuel industry, but I had a few other offers and decided getting paid a lot and having weekends off was really overrated. So instead, I entered the world of academe and running the nonprofit project Beyond Plastics. As Jennifer mentioned, I teach at Bennington College. We have a spectacular online class that you're welcome to take. I see lots of former students on the screen tonight. Our next class will be taught in April and May of 2022, and registration opens on Monday. It's on Wednesday evenings from 7 to 9, and about 2/3 of the students are typically community people who audit the class. I decided to work on plastics because it was a water quality issue. About 15 million metric tons of plastic enter the ocean every year, mostly street litter, litter from the beach, gets into the water, the river, through a sewage treatment plant and into the ocean. Plastics is also an important waste issue. Many Americans think we can recycle our way out of the plastic pollution problem, but in fact, only 8.5% of plastics are recycled. I also decided to work on plastics because it's an environmental justice issue. When you look at where plastic manufacturing facilities are located and where incinerators and landfills are located for over 90% of the plastics, you quickly realize that they're almost always sited in low-income communities and communities of color. So that creates health problems for people living near these facilities. And also just our general use of plastic. I was startled a few months ago to read a peer-reviewed scientific paper from a team of researchers in Italy who for the first time documented the presence of microplastics in the human placenta, both on the maternal side and the fetal side of the placenta. So some of those issues are beginning to come into focus for Americans. But what a lot of people don't understand is the climate change connection to plastics. And that's why we did this phenomenally great report that hopefully you have by now, or you can get on our website. You know, the climate crisis is here. Global temperatures are now the highest that they've ever been in the past 125,000 years. The UN Secretary General called climate change a code red for humanity, and he's right. So that's why at Beyond Plastics, we decided to do this report. The report takes a very detailed look at the 10 high impact ways that plastic contributes to climate change from the beginning to the end, from fracking to cracking to incineration. This report found plastic to be a major source of greenhouse gases, a source that few people know about, and for instance, members of Congress are not aware of. We decided to compare the greenhouse gas emissions from coal burning power plants so people had some context in terms of how much the numbers really meant. So for instance, as of 2020, the US plastics industry is responsible for around 232 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States every year. So you're sitting there thinking, well, how much is that? Well, that amount is the equivalent to the average emissions from 116 coal-fired power plants. In the near future, meaning within the next decade, the plastics industry's contribution to climate change is on track to exceed the greenhouse gas emissions from coal-fired power plants. The health impacts of these emissions are disproportionately borne by low-income communities and communities of color, again, making this a major environmental justice issue. The good news is that 65% of the coal plants in the United States have been closed in recent years. This is a really important accomplishment that we should celebrate. It was driven by grassroots activists with a campaign called Beyond Coal and Sierra Club and many other people. However, our report found that plastics are replacing coal as a major source of atmospheric greenhouse gases. So as the world transitions away from fossil fuels, the petrochemical industry has found this new market, and that's plastics. We know that if the status quo continues, plastic infrastructure expansion will dramatically increase greenhouse gas emissions. Our report doesn't get into air toxics issues, but they go along with these sources of greenhouse gas emissions. At least 42 plastic facilities have opened or expanded since 2019. They're either under construction or in the permitting process. And if they become fully operational, these new plastic plants could release an additional 55 million tons of greenhouse gases, the equivalent of another 27 coal-fired power plants. So as you go through the different sections of the report, each section includes a summary of what the emissions are and then little icons of coal plants, some shaded in, some not. So the report finds that as coal plants close, the petrochemical infrastructure will expand. And here's the major takeaway. By 2030, the emissions from plastics will exceed that of coal. Plastics are the new coal. In our report, we identify 18 communities where more than 90% of the greenhouse gas emissions are emitted from plastic production. These are all low-income communities and communities of color. I was surprised that this was concentrated in 18 communities. half of them are in Texas, roughly 53% in Texas, 33% in Louisiana. Petrochemical expansion relies on hydrofracking, which greatly expanded in the 1990s. So the result has been a superabundance of fracked gas, which has turned the United States into the global engine of plastic production. Now, I want to take a moment and talk about ethane crackers, which is section 3 of the report. Kind of a funny name. If you took my class, you know all about ethane crackers. I go on and on about ethane crackers. Most people think it's a snack. Let me explain what it is. Right now in the United States, there are about 1 million new oil and gas wells that are hydrofracked. And if you look at a hydrofracking site, which you can easily do looking online, you'll see a flare at the well pad. That's ethane gas. It's a very potent greenhouse gas that is flared into the atmosphere. In a few instances, what's happening now is new pipelines are being constructed from hydrofracking sites to send the ethane gas to new multi-billion-dollar facilities called ethane cracker facilities. They're owned by little mom and pop companies like Shell and ExxonMobil. And what happens is at these cracker facilities, the ethane is heated at very high temperature and cracked, thus the name. And then it produces massive amounts of small pieces of plastic or plastic powder. And that's all used to create single-use plastic packaging. All this energy and all of this pollution, just so we can have more plastic bags, more plastic straws. Now, unless you live in one of the communities where these facilities are being constructed, this is happening under the radar. Not a lot of people know about this. And I want to direct you to page 12 of the report, which includes a map. There are currently 35 operating ethane cracker plants in the United States, emitting 70 tons of greenhouse gases every year. That's the equivalent of 35 coal plants. There are 12 major cracker expansions proposed at existing locations, mostly in the Gulf states. And there are 2 large ethane cracker plants that are very close to starting to operate soon. The Shell facility in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and then also a joint venture between ExxonMobil and SABIC in Corpus Christi, Texas. And then there are 3 new cracker plants proposed. One is Formosa in St. James Parish, Louisiana. The cover of this report, we're very honored to have the permission to have a photo of Sharon Levine. Sharon's this amazing woman. She is a retired special ed teacher. She's a resident of St. James Parish, Louisiana, where Formosa Plastics wants to build a new $9 billion plastic manufacturing complex, which has 2 ethane crackers. This is all happening with financial support from taxpayers in Louisiana because Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards is supportive. Sharon Levine recently won the prestigious Goldman Environmental Prize, which honors the world's most effective environmental advocates. This one ethane cracker would emit 13.6 million metric tons of greenhouse gases every year, making it the largest new source of greenhouse gas emissions in the entire country. And I have to mention, it will also emit 800 tons of toxic air pollution every year. All of this just to produce more single-use, cheap plastic packaging. The Army Corps of Engineers announced in August that they will be doing a full environmental review of the project. It's kind of stunning that it was not required before, but the Biden administration has committed to a full environmental review. So, in summary, there's an important shift going on in our economy. Fossil fuel has typically been used for two major things. One is transportation, right? We put gas in our cars and trucks. The other major market for fossil fuel is electricity generation. But due to hard work, we know that we're shifting away from fossil fuel for electricity generation. We're investing in solar and wind and heat pumps and fuel cells and geothermal. And also, almost all of us are on a waiting list to get an electric car. We're electrifying transportation, making investments in mass transit. So plastics is the plan B for the fossil fuel industry. And there's no plan B for the rest of us. We are in a climate crisis. Congress is currently debating federal infrastructure bills and whether or not to pass President Biden's Build Back Better. It's a lot of B's. Virtually no discussion of plastics and climate change. The United Nations is convening right now in Glasgow, Scotland, with no recognition about plastics and climate change. So if we're going to have any hope to drive down greenhouse gas emissions and not be in a situation where we work so hard to drive them down in the electricity sector, we don't want the emissions just being replaced from plastic production. And recycling only gets us so far. We are really proud of this report. It is purposely short. It is easy to read. Share it with people in your community. Share it with reporters that you know. And now I am so honored to introduce Jim Vallette, who was the main researcher and author of this report. Jim is a longtime investigator looking very closely at climate change issues, toxic substances, and waste. And he is the president of Material Research in Maine. And Jim will now walk you through the report in some greater detail.
Great. Thank you, Judith, very much. I'm getting some echo here. No? Okay. It's great to be with you all today. We'll wait for Jennifer to cue up the slides. Great. So yeah, I'd like to start with an overview of the resources that we have developed for everybody's use through our collaboration. This is all open access information. It's free for all to use. Having this kind of essential information available to everybody for free is a big part of my little company, Material Research's mission. Someone could please mute. So anyway, I'm glad to be, I'm grateful and glad to have been in this collaboration with Beyond Plastics and Bennington College that makes this open access information and analysis possible. Beyond Plastics webpage on climate and plastics features this report and supplemental resources that I hope you'll find useful. These include the methodology behind our calculations, a map of plastics industry facilities in the United States, and a spreadsheet with lots of information about these plastics factories. The cornerstone of our report is this spreadsheet. It details 150 million tons out of the 232 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions that we associate with the US plastics industry. Facilities with significant amounts of greenhouse gas pollution must report this to the US Environmental Protection Agency. In 2020, more than 120 plastics factories filed these reports. The spreadsheet groups these facilities by the communities in which they're located. It shows the stage of production, that the facility performs. It also provides information about the dates of recent additions to the industry's capacity and expansions that are underway or planned. So it's a good way of being able to track recent additions and the ongoing build out of petrochemicals. As the spreadsheet shows, these plastics factories reported 114 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions last year. Our calculations include estimated releases of methane, an extremely potent greenhouse gas. Methane is leaked into the atmosphere when natural gas liquids are extracted by fracking and processed and distributed by pipelines and by ships to the plastics industry around the world. This leads to at least 36 million tons of methane greenhouse gas emissions per year. Our calculations are based on methane.
Jim, excuse me, there was a request for you to speak a little louder, if you could.
Louder. Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Is this better? Okay. These calculations, for the methane leakage are based on methane leakage rates calculated by Dr. Robert Howarth of Cornell University and Dr. Mark Jacobson of Stanford University. As Judith mentioned, the releases in the report are expressed in carbon dioxide equivalents in summary boxes for each section. You can see that at left. The icons, each icon represents 2 million tons of emissions, which is the amount of greenhouse gas released by the average 500 megawatt coal-fired power plant in 2020. This means that the methane leaked by the plastics industry's demand is the equivalent of the climate pollution from 18 average coal-fired power plants. This is definitely an understatement. For consistency, we followed EPA's regulatory framework for carbon dioxide equivalence between gases. The agency uses a factor of 25 for methane, and that's based on a 100-year time frame. However, methane lasts in the atmosphere for only 12 years. And during that time, it has a much more severe climate impact. In the short term, methane has not 25, but at least 84 times the impact of carbon dioxide. Using this conversion rate, our calculated 36 million ton estimate for releases from fracking for plastics balloons to 120 million tons, or the equivalent of 60, that's 60 coal-fired power plants. Gas liquids extracted for plastics wind up at massive chemical plants that have ethane crackers that Judith described. As she explained, these crackers superheat the gas until the molecules crack into new components, including ethylene, that are the essential ingredients of plastics. Our report provides details on where these crackers are located and where new ones are being planned. Beyond Plastics webpage also features a map of the facilities that reported greenhouse gas data to EPA in 2020. The colors are keyed to the amount of climate pollution that they reported. As you dive into the map, you can see clusters emerging. Many people look at petrochemical plants in isolation from each other, but there are many interdependencies between them. Understanding these relationships is essential to assessing the public health and all the other tolls that this industry imposes, mainly upon communities of color. In addition to the climate pollution, these facilities release massive amounts of toxic pollutants, including plastic dust and powder, into the air and into the water. And this pollution causes extreme cumulative impacts in some of the country's most vulnerable communities. One of the key findings from our report is that, as Judith mentioned, is that plastic factories in 18 communities are responsible for over 90% of the greenhouse gases reported by this industry to EPA. You can find this table and this slide in the methodology appendix to the report, all of which you can find easily on Beyond Plastics webpage for this report and all the appendices. This table shows the number of people who live in closest proximity to the industry. That's well over 300,000 people. Weighted by population, it reveals that 67% of the residents are people of color and have far less income than the rest of the United States. The Centers for Disease Control says the communities in the heart of the plastics industry are extremely vulnerable to the impacts of this pollution. Plastics plants with ethane crackers are responsible for a lot of climate pollution, but there are other kinds of chemicals that are produced for plastics and also release a lot of gas. These include chlorine, which is combined with ethylene to make polyvinyl chloride, and methanol, which is produced directly from the refining of methane. In addition to its use as a fuel, a lot of methanol is used to produce plastic resins. These are based on formaldehyde. Formaldehyde resins are used as adhesives, for example, in countertops and engineered wood, flooring, and these products, some may recall after Hurricane Katrina, contaminated the FEMA trailers and caused a lot of childhood asthma. Methanol facilities like this one pictured in Beaumont, Texas, are outsized contributors to climate change. This one unit released 1 million tons of greenhouse gases in 2020. Some of the biggest sources of potential emissions are new methanol plants. The industry plans to open 10 of these in Louisiana and Texas, in plastics hubs like St. James Parish, Lake Charles, and Geismar, Louisiana. According to the Environmental Integrity Project's analysis of permits, these new methanol to plastics plants could emit a combined 10 million tons of greenhouse gases each year, if and when they are built. Another trend I see is how much of the US plastics industry is export oriented. Of all the plastic resins made in the United States, almost half, 44%, are exported. Much of the recent build out in the United States has not been for the domestic market, but rather to provide raw materials from ethane to vinyl chloride monomer to resins that are turned into plastics in other countries. Occidental Chemical, for example, recently added a cracker in Ingleside, Texas, just to supply raw material to plastics manufacturers in Mexico and Colombia. Within the last 5 years, a whole new category of ships were launched just to take feedstocks from the US. These vessels, which are 600 feet long and longer, these are called very large ethane carriers. They saddle up to the end of pipelines in Texas and Pennsylvania and haul ethane to crackers overseas in India, China, and Europe. We found that just this act of shipping ethane to overseas crackers released about 1 million tons of greenhouse gases in 2020. Through these exports, plastics is very much like the new coal, because the coal industry also is counting on exports to stay alive. Another very concerning source of emissions from the plastics industry comes from fluorochemicals, such as hydrofluorocarbons that are used as blowing agents in plastic insulation, like spray foam insulation or what's known as styrofoam commonly. There has been very little public attention on these chemicals in plastic insulation and their fate. Hydrofluorocarbon gases escape from plastic insulation from the time it is installed to the time it is buried in landfills, decades later, and even thereafter. just 1 year's production of fluorochemicals that are used in plastic insulation in the United States will have the climate impact of at least 13 coal-fired power plants. This is probably, again, a significant underestimate. The United Nations says that eliminating the use of fluorochemicals in plastic insulation worldwide would prevent over 1 billion, it's billion with a B, tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. Other fluorochemicals are polymers like PTFE, known as Teflon. This causes not only PFAS pollution, but significant greenhouse gas emissions. Sites like Chemours' factories in North Carolina and West Virginia and Dakin's plant in Alabama are climate pollution hotspots. Fluorochemicals are used in many common household items. When these products, from fast food packaging to dental floss to outdoor clothing, when these consumer products are tossed in the trash and burned in municipal waste incinerators, well, even more highly potent gases are released. Some of these gases are more than 10,000 times more powerful than carbon dioxide. And yet, there's very little understanding about these emissions from garbage incinerators. There are no regulations, no effort to see what's coming out of these smokestacks. As we note in the report, our estimate that the US plastics industry is responsible for 232 million tons of greenhouse gases per year, that's a floor and not a ceiling. It's an estimate that's really quite conservative. There are potentially hundreds of millions of tons of emissions that can be quantified with more time and collaborations like this. I appreciate your interest in this vital subject. I hope that this information you can take to use in your daily work. Thank you for listening to all these details. And thanks especially to Judith Enck for your vision of a future beyond plastics, and to the incredible Beyond Plastics team that worked so hard to make this so. I'll turn the webinar back over now to Judith.
Hi, I'll actually take it from here for a second. Thanks, Jim, for that incredible walkthrough and all of your hard work crunching the numbers for this report. We really appreciate everything that you've done. So I'm going to share my screen again, and just give me 1 second to get it all together. And of course, this is when my kids are coming home and everybody's going to come inside and be loud. All right, here we go. So next I'd like to introduce Alexis Golsdmith, who joined our team at Beyond Plastics in January of 2021. It feels like much longer. She's done incredible work with us. She's an energetic grassroots organizer who grew up in Indiana. I told everyone it would get loud. Before beginning her work at Beyond Plastics, Alexis worked at the Sanctuary for Independent Media in New York's Capital Region. She's produced hundreds of interviews, largely on petrochemicals and environmental activism. She co-founded the Hudson Mohawk Environmental Action Network, which works, a grassroots consortium that advocates for environmental justice and indigenous rights along the Hudson River. So I'll turn it over to you, Alexis.
Thanks, Jennifer. Really nice to talk to everyone tonight. And I'm going to be brief because we've all been hit with a lot of information, and just tell you how you can get involved and what you can do with this information. As Jim was presenting about these numbers, I got kind of curious about, what the scale of these numbers are and what is actually 1 million tons of carbon dioxide. So I just looked it up, and the EPA, according to the EPA, if you drive the average passenger vehicle for 1 mile, that is 0.9 pounds of carbon dioxide. So I did some numbers, and if me and 999 of my closest friends all got in our separate cars and drove to Boulder, Colorado, which is about 1,800 miles from me, that would be 1 million tons of carbon dioxide. And as Judith said, the proposed Formosa plastics complex in St. James Parish, Louisiana, would emit 13.4 million tons of carbon dioxide per year. So I just want to say that these communities are organized. These fence line communities where this infrastructure is being built are organized, and they have a message to our federal government, and they are asking the Biden administration to halt new permits for new and expanded petrochemical facilities and really take a hard look at what the implications of this expansion would have on climate, health, our environment, our future quality of life, and to also create a pathway for communities to have reparations for the environmental injustice caused by living next to these facilities. So we have an action that you can take that is on the screen now. The link is right there. You can send a letter to Biden's Army Corps of Engineers, the EPA, and the White House's Council on Environmental Quality, and support those voices that are calling for a moratorium on these permits. Next slide. We also have a toolkit page on our website, beyondplastics.org/tools, plastics and climate. On this page, which is fully dedicated to our report, we have a lot of different tools on our website, not dedicated to this report, but you will find sample slides if you ever do talks at your local communities, if you ever, want to have a forum on this, if you talk to the PTA, whoever you talk to, you can take sample slides and present this information yourself, the main points of this report. You can find a sample letter to the editor if you're the newsy type that likes to write to your editor and amplify this message that plastics is also a climate change issue. And I was just going to say something else, but I forgot. What was I going to say? Oh, I was going to say, I also recommend that you download the report from our website and send it to your representatives. When you message them or have a constituent meeting with them or in contact with them, send them this report and let them know that this is an issue that they should pay attention to. And I think that's all for me. Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alexis, for your incredible work on this and for giving us all some concrete actions to take. I think that this is it's a really important one, and I do think it will help make a difference. So there are even more ways that you can get involved with our work. You can, we love when people take action and get involved with us in our organizing work. And we are also a nonprofit organization, so we definitely need donations, and our work exists because people support it. So you can make a one-time gift to Beyond Plastics. You could become a monthly donor. If you're a business, you could work through 1% for the planet and sign up to be a partner with us. You can also, really easy, we just got text to give, so you can text from your phone to this number and it will bring you to our Action Network page to make a gift. And then, of course, if you don't already, I think many of you do follow us on social media, but you can also sign up for our newsletter, which is new. We're putting it out monthly, and follow us on social media. And those are some of the best ways to get involved and stay informed on what we're working on. So I will end my screen share, and we will start the Q&A. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function, and I will call on you, and we'll try to get through as many as we can before 8 o'clock. So thank you so much. Megan Manning.
Hi, I'm new to this group and I really appreciate all of the information. I'm really passionate about learning more and also finding alternatives. And I didn't hear about anything about alternative options that we should be using on a daily basis. So any information about that would be appreciated.
Judith, do you want to?
There are
Yeah.
lots of alternatives to plastics. You know, a lot of times people think we need some major new breakthrough, some new material. We strongly recommend that people shift to reusable items. For instance, New York State has banned single-use plastic bags at supermarkets, and it's really heartening to see so many people bring their own reusable bags to the store. Stop using single-use anything when you go get a cup of coffee. Just bring your coffee mug with you. New York City has a new law that took effect November 1st. Plastic straws only upon request, and that covers stirrers and those dreadful little splash guards that are on the top of your Starbucks coffee, because my, we can't get a little drop of coffee in our hand. So what we urge you to do is look at the plastic that's most common in your daily life and see if you can do a switch out or a substitute. So in our house, we drink a lot of orange juice. I know it has too much sugar in it. So it's lots and lots of plastic bottles. And so we switched to frozen concentrate. You just buy a glass pitcher, make that frozen concentrate juice every few days. That was a more important shift than, say, the plastic ketchup bottle, because we're not big condiment people. I probably have one thing of ketchup last for 3 years. It's actually disgusting. So just kind of do that evaluation. There are a lot of good resources. Our website, Plastic Pollution Coalition, Upstream Solutions, a really good website to look at our strategy as a community of pushing reuse and refill. I hope that helped a little.
Great. Okay. Next, I have Kat. Also, I forgot to say, if you are affiliated with any organization, please just let us know when you say your name and ask your question. Okay, Kat?
And the way you raise your hand is the bottom bar. Go to reactions where the smiley face is and click on that, and you'll see the raise hand feature.
Thank you, Judith.
Thank you. I am wondering, this has been an issue for me for a really long time. I collected all the plastic that I got from the store this year. It's in a big pile in my garage. It's unbelievable how much crap is in there. I would like to know if there are any campaigns around pressuring retailers to stop the plastic stream. I buy a package of toilet paper, and the toilet paper comes wrapped in plastic, and inside there's plastic around 4 rolls of toilet paper. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I feel like that pressure needs to be applied, not just individually, but that pressure needs to be applied to big corporations in a big way to tell them we will not support your businesses if you continue to use single-use plastics. And we have banned single-use plastic grocery bags in our stores, but we still use single-use plastic produce bags. We've banned straws in our neighborhood, in our city, but you still buy a bottle of hand cream, and that's essentially got a straw that pumps the liquid up. So it's like, you can have the best of intentions, but unless we get it out of the packaging business, it's just really difficult.
Judith, you want to start with this one?
I'll start, and then I'm going to hand it over to you, Jennifer, because you've got a lot to add. I think it's a good idea to contact retail stores and also particular brands. But as a former federal regulator, I am really interested in new laws and then strong enforcement of those laws. And so the state of Maine and Oregon this year adopted a law called Extended Producer Responsibility. So the producers of the packaging have fiscal responsibility to make sure that they're not flooding us with single-use non-recyclable packaging. And I'll hand it over to my esteemed colleague, Jennifer, to tell you a little bit more about extended producer responsibility.
So a group of environmental policy experts have been working together over the past few months to develop a new piece of model legislation, which is based on extended producer responsibility, but also would put into law standards for, first of all, reducing packaging, and then for recyclability and recycled content requirements. And there would also be, just like regular extended producer responsibility, producers would be responsible fiscally for the packaging they're putting on the market. And then we recommend taking that funding stream and putting it into refill and reuse systems, and also fixing the broken recycling system. So that's the basics of EPR. And I hope you'll all stay tuned for when we're ready to launch that in about a month. And we'll send it all out to our lists. And hopefully we'll have partners at the state level in all of you to help get those state level laws passed. Okay, next we have Dipali Mathur.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'll be brief and quick. I'm very new to this. All this data is very mind-boggling, and you provided a lot of information. I was wondering, do you do any work about styrofoam? So I briefly was reading styrofoam is absolutely not recyclable. So ice cream shops are still sending styrofoam. So I want to know about what's your work regarding styrofoam and how we can encourage our local businesses and ourselves cut down on styrofoam use.
Well, we hate styrofoam. Judith, would you like to start with this one?
Yes, that summed it up nicely. It's polystyrene. Styrofoam is the brand name by Dow. The problems with polystyrene is it's made from a suspected carcinogen, a chemical called styrene. The styrene producers will tell you it's recyclable, but in the real world, it's not. It's a 0.00001 recycling rate. So whenever we work to ban polystyrene, the companies come in and say, don't ban it, recycle it. Well, good luck recycling it. There's not a reliable market. It's a terrible source of litter because it's so brittle, it breaks down. And there are viable alternatives. So about 8 states have banned polystyrene. New York State will ban it on January 1st. There's not enough publicity about this, so we started tweeting about it today. I really think the only thing you can do with polystyrene is ban it. And a lot of the bans also cover plastic packing peanuts.
So, yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah, just like how, so I wanted to, my daughter is also very much interested. How do I approach this ice cream place or other place? So they're like, what is a substitute? So I don't know what to offer them, like for a cost-effective substitute. Maybe it's very cheap. That's why they're using the styrofoam cups. So what's the substitute that a viable, cost-effective substitute if I'm asking them to give this up?
Yeah, so there are paper and cardboard fiber alternatives that many stores are using. They're often a little bit more expensive than polystyrene. Polystyrene is really cheap, but go to our website. There's more information there on polystyrene. We also have a model local law called the Beyond Plastics Law that has 4 elements to it. It bans polystyrene, 5-cent fee on paper bags, bans plastic bags, plastic straws only upon request, and then it bans the intentional release of balloons. So there's model language there if you want to do a legislative effort in your community. Sometimes it's easier to pass a local law than to go business by business by business.
Yeah, and that particular model legislation is perfect for local jurisdictions. In the EPR, the model EPR bill that we will release later this year, there will also it will also recommend banning certain chemicals from packaging, including styrene, and so it would effectively get rid of polystyrene as well. So, okay, next we have Barbara Woods. Barbara?
Thank you. I have a question. I'm Barbara Woods. I'm from Fourth Universalist in New York City. I'm from the environmental justice team. I have a question about the relationship between the National Bottle Bill and the Break Free from Plastic Act. It seemed like it was a way to try and get certain portions of the Break Free Act passed. Is that correct? Or what's the relationship between the two?
Judith.
I love bottle bill questions. I live for them. Bottle bills are one of the most effective way to reduce litter and boost recycling. And in fact, tomorrow, Beyond Plastics will be joining NYPIRG and Sierra Club and others in Albany at a news conference urging that the New York bottle bill be expanded to cover non-carbonated beverages, wine and liquor, up the deposit to a dime, and incentivize refillable containers. So we're calling on New York Governor Hochul to expand the bottle bill. At the federal level, the gold standard, fantastic national bill to reduce plastic pollution is called the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. It's HR 2238 and Senate Bill 984. And Barbara, you're correct. There's been a lot of discussion about carving the national bottle bill away from that bill and just trying to pass that. I think we will see a new national bottle bill proposal by the end of the year, and we'll have new bill numbers. And people who live in bottle bill states, which is about 9 states, will have an opportunity to weigh in about how effective that law is and why we need a nationwide bottle bill. So stuff is happening. So, keep your eyes peeled, check out our website. If you sign up at beyondplastics.org, our free email list, we'll send you an update when things start popping.
I have one follow-up question too. We had a rally this summer in front of Schumer's office, and it seemed like his staff is really interested in the Break Free from Plastic Act. Schumer's a little bit dubious just because he doesn't think he can get it passed. But do you think it's worth having another rally in front of his office about this new climate report? Do you think we should try and do it again?
Absolutely. I think you should take this new climate report and everyone should do a rally in front of their legislator's office everywhere and invite the media and invite allies. We got to get the word out. It's kind of nuts that Little Beyond Plastics put out the report on plastics and climate change. It really should have come from, I don't know, the United Nations or the EPA. So take our report, which thanks to Jim Vallette is spot on and accurate, and bring it to congressional offices, maybe splurge and print out one paper copy for them and hand it to them and look them in the eyeball and say, please read this. And because it's laid out so beautifully. So help us spread the word. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. All right, next up we have Sarah Dunlop.
Thank you very much. Sarah Dunlop, Minderoo Foundation, Australia. I'm feeling a sense of total shock, I guess, and all. I read your report a while ago, and this is so urgent. We have to do something. It strikes me that there are many different avenues that need to be taken. There's the public campaigning. We have to change policy. We have to get the knowledge about health impacts of plastic on human health out there, and we're working in that space. We need to change chemical regulation, and we probably also need strategic litigation, and all of those are going to take time. And I think, Judith, the point that you just made about getting to the top, the United Nations, the world is really, it's a point well made. And the other element that I think is missing with this is engagement with industry and getting to the top of the food chain, the source of the problem, and trying to bring them to their senses so that they don't continue to trash the planet. So it needs everything that you're doing, plus that sort of higher level, really hard hitting work. And I think industry has to come to the table. I wonder what your thoughts are in doing that. And can I please just mention the No Plastic Waste Makers Index from the Mindru Foundation,
Please,
where
yes.
they named the top 20 polymer producers and their financiers and the banks and everything and the shareholders who are producing at least 50% of the world's polymers, right? So that's really good. In our space, in Plastics and Human Health in Mindru Foundation, I want to produce a similar league table, but for the production of the additives, the plasticizers and such,
Great.
like, about which we know there are harmful human health effects. And hopefully that will be done in the next few months. But I'd love your thoughts on how we can get together and really get to the top of this beast, because we have to. There's so little time left. And it's the climate change, but it's all the other toxic effects as well that are so terrifying and, quite frankly, bringing the planet to a halt.
Yeah, I'm well said. I mean, I love the Mindru Foundation on the top makers of plastics. It's kind of the roadmap on where to start. I mean, it's very similar to Dr. Richard Heady's report on fossil fuel companies. I kind of view that as the equivalent. So thank you for producing that, and congrats. I mean, I'm reminded of Bill McKibben's comments, winning slowly is losing. And we follow the climate change issue. We're involved in the climate change issue. And I'm absolutely terrified at the notion that we're going to be seeing plans to solve this problem by 2040. You know, we don't have that time. We have to roll now. I mean, every time it rains, massive amounts of plastic go into rivers and the ocean. Scientists tell us that by 2025, unless we change the status quo, we're probably looking at 1 pound of plastic for every 3 pounds of fish. And so I think organizations and individuals, this is the only time I'll say this, need to do all of the above. I don't believe in an all of the above energy policy, but if people can engage directly with corporations, they should. If people are more into meeting with members of Congress, they should. There is a huge number of people in the world who care deeply about the plastics issue. And they often start with, how do you get rid of plastics in your own life? That's good, but we need systemic change. And my fear with engaging with big companies is many of them are not changing because plastics is cheap. I've spoken to companies we've tried to get them to shift to glass for some things, and they say, well, it's another half a cent per container, so we can't. Yeah.
And I'd like to reply to that, because plastics are not cheap. When you take into account if you factor in the full cost of the environmental damage that they're doing, the climate change damage, it's actually very expensive, the cleanup, etc. It's also not convenient when you think of all the mess it makes. It's also not simple, it's very complicated. So I think we need an economic modeling that says, well, this is the true cost of plastic or the true cost of producing fuel.
Right.
And factor that into the cost and actually pay for it. Because at the moment, it's environmental health and our health that's paying for it. So
totally agree. And
it's how you do it. It's how you shift it.
Well, I'm with you, sister. The one thing I'll mention is I was on an EPA meeting the other day, US EPA, and they said that they're going to release a report called The Social Cost of Waste, similar to the social cost of carbon. So that may get the full life cycle analysis that we need.
Okay, I think we have time for one final question. Joseph Pepe. Joseph, unmute.
Sorry. Hey.
Okay.
Joe Pepe. I'm a climate leader with the Climate Reality Project in the Hudson Valley, New York. And quick comment on things that individuals can do. You get packages. We're all getting all these packages delivered to our doorstep. filled with all kinds of plastic materials, I call them up and say, I love your product, but you got to stop sending all this plastic, or email them and tell them. On the question, the recent signature agreement between China and the U.S. on the reduction of methane output at the COP26 just got signed. I'm wondering if that is anticipated to have a positive impact on this plastics problem. And the second question, real quick, on divestment. You know, divestment is becoming having a positive impact on the fossil fuel industry. Why not apply the same tactics to this aspect of it and try to get the financial backing away from this? If it's going to cost $9 billion to put up a new plant, let's not spend that money. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Judith?
On your first question, will the methane agreement impact plastics? I believe it will. It's very new. I haven't read it yet. I think it will help. And on divestment, they're kind of like two lanes. One is divestment, which has taken, upwards of 20 years to accomplish. It's amazing seeing all the colleges and institutions that are divesting. And then there's the other issue of who's financing all of this petrochemical build out. So I think that is very important and worth focusing on. And someone put in the chat, follow the money. I completely agree.
Absolutely. So we're going to have to wrap up, but if anyone has unanswered questions or just wants to get in touch, Alexis put into the chat our contact page. It's beyondplastics.org/contact, and just reach out to us at any time and we'll get back to you. We're pretty good about doing it quickly. And look forward to seeing many of you even more involved with our upcoming work. Judith, do you want to say anything else?
No, this was great. I mean, we could go on for hours, and we all have. So we're going to let you go get dinner or fold the laundry. We recorded this. It'll be up on Monday if you want to share it with others. Use the toolkit. Great job facilitating, Jennifer. And thank you again, Jim Vallette. And good night, everyone. Thanks for joining.
You can also view this on YouTube, on our YouTube channel at any time. Thank you.
Thank you. Another tremendous program from Beyond Plastics.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
need this.
Thank
Chain
you.
of custody, extended producer responsibility. Let's have it.
Thank you.
Ottleville.
Judith always hits it out of the park.
Thank you so much.
Lauren. Everyone do the cruise ship wave now.